All right, we're recording. Hey everyone, I'm Evan LaRuffa of IPaintMyMind. Hope everyone's doing well today. I'm excited to record this little video for you about art and activism and really the photography of mine that you've already been working with and looking at and thinking about. So just want to give a big thanks to Principal Graves and your teacher there, Mr. Thomas, who's doing an incredible job using some of the tools that are part of our I Paint My Mind program. And yeah, obviously since you are doing remote learning right now and it's a brand new world out here, we wanted to figure out some ways where we could just connect over your experience of the art of my work, which my photography, which we'll be installing once you are back in school. But yeah, I'm going to go through this presentation and yeah, kind of talk to you a little bit about I Paint My Mind. I know many of you enjoyed the artwork in your school last year by Jay Ryan, those really cool, colorful illustrations. So yeah, really hope you enjoyed that. And yeah, really excited to kind of talk to you about I Paint My Mind, about photography, and making your own digital art. So we're going to have a cool activity that I'll kind of kick off towards the end of the video. And yeah, we're also going to kind of focus on a series of photography work that I created last year, which I call Post No Bills, which is really about taking really cool up close shots of small things and then editing those photos in post-production. So after you've taken the photo, then playing with colors and contrast and tint and cropping and different things like that. So we'll get into that as well. But let's get started here. So here we have it. We're at I Paint My Mind. We are a nonprofit arts organization that is all about bringing art to communities. So for us, we think you shouldn't have to go to a museum to experience really cool art. And so we're working really hard to get art galleries and art resources and programs and activities out into these schools where all of you can really enjoy them. Yeah, and as I mentioned, we're really going to kind of talk about I Paint My Mind, what we do, photography, and then launch into how you'll make your own art as well. All right, there we go. Cool. You might have seen our website before. This is the homepage of our website at ipaintmymind.org. If you're ever just like looking for cool art, feel free to go to our website. You can come up to this Who We Are tab, and that'll fall down, and you can click on blog, and there's like lots of cool art in there if you're ever looking for stuff. But yeah, we talk about turning art into impact. We think that you as students here in Chicago, as you grow up, you're learning about different things, what you might be into, how you best express yourself. And so we think art is really an incredible vehicle for you guys to stretch your legs and create. These are just some photos of the work that we do at I Paint My Mind. So over the last 6 years, we've worked with over 100 Chicago public schools all over the city. Obviously LaSalle now in our second year, and schools on the south side, the west side, east side, north side, everywhere. And so you'll see we've got, this was an artist workshop that we did with a local screen printer, Dan Jetsa, at Northwest Middle School. Sam Kirk here, she's a muralist. You might have seen her stuff and big murals all over the city. She's on our board of directors as a really cool artist. And yeah, some of our volunteers hanging at Portage Park Elementary. Gray Rosa, one of the artists that we work with doing a workshop at Bateman. And this is a photo of one of our community dinners where we bring our different partners together. And yeah, you'll recognize some familiar faces there. Well, at least your Principal Gray is there who joined us for that evening. Cool, so just really quickly before we jump in with both feet, and I think this can be a cool spot, Mr. Thomas, to potentially pause, engage in some discussion, and then kind of come back and keep going. So, the question that I want to come to here is like, did you enjoy the art in your hallway last year? And if you did, why did you enjoy it? What do you remember about it? Are there colors or characters or shapes or words or letters or ideas that you can kind of think back on, right? And you can both think about the art that was in the hallway last year. And as I mentioned, Mr. Thomas told me that you're already kind of studying some of my photography as well. So you could kind of apply this question both ways. Like, did you enjoy it last year? We really hope you did. We were excited the way the framed art really made, kind of brought the space to life, added color. We saw plenty of you really enjoying it, both teachers and students, as you walk through the hallway. But yeah, just thinking about like, what does it feel like to be in a space with art, right? And then potentially, what does it feel like to be in a space that doesn't have art, right? And so we know that spaces make us feel certain ways, and so this is a cool time to kind of pause and think about, how did the art make you feel, right? And Mr. Thomas, you can also potentially expand the question into, what other art do you enjoy, and what do you remember about that art, right? Because what we want to think about is how art speaks to you personally and how you relate to it. Cool. So, my creative journey is really kind of boils down to those three words that you see in the bottom of the screen: culture, activism, and art making. I went to Inter-American Magnet School. It's a Chicago public school. And I was really super lucky to have a really thriving kind of mix of art and activism. And so for me, culture and activism and art making were all kind of like jumbled into the same thing, but also made it so that I was kind of required to participate, right? So a lot of times I think, for yourself, just thinking about, what would I have to say, right? And so I think a lot of times our culture largely informs our perspective, like who we are with, who we spend time with, what our cultural norms are, what we eat, where we're from, how we speak. All these things, I think, influence how we view the world. And I think especially in the time that we're living here in 2020, with all the social movements that are happening, and really a reckoning as far as equal rights and equity and justice in the United States of America, that activism is kind of central to it as well, right? Like, what can you create creatively? What can you make artistically that would convey a message around what you believe and what you think the world should be, right? And so as we kind of look at art, digest art, think about how it's made, we can kind of dive into that art making a bit more. But I think it is kind of about connecting your personal experience, what you believe in, what you think the world should be, with what you might decide to make. So now I'm going to get into some examples of some photography and art and different things that have moved me. Yeah, I think really what we want to kind of think about is, what do you want to express? What is important to you? What do you want to share with the world, right? So this is a photo that I took at the Aragon Ballroom. It's a concert venue here in Chicago over on Lawrence Avenue at about Broadway. Tons of big concerts there. It's about a 5,500, 6,000 capacity venue. And for a bunch of years with I Paint My Mind, we would take concert photography. So whether it was up here in the front or on the side of the stage, I took a bunch of photos from the side stage there, which was really cool because of all the projection and light and cool stuff that you see. But this is me standing on a balcony similar to this one on the other side of the venue. And really, live concert photography is super challenging because it's super, super dark and hard to predict what kind of light sources you'll have with all the strobes and all the different stuff. But I think, this is an example of photography capturing a moment, which is really cool. But for me, it's also about music, right? Like, I've always been a huge lover of music. And actually, one of the ways that I started collecting art was by buying gig posters. There were a few gig posters by Jay Ryan hanging in your hallway last year, right? And gig posters are basically advertisements, art that is used as an advertisement for the concert. So that you'll see the poster around, you'll say, oh yeah, I want to go to that concert, I'm going to go buy my ticket, right? So in any case, like, concerts are an incredible way, I think, to see how art and music come together, and also just a place where I think as young people, we're often inspired, right? So this is not photography, this is a painting. You might have seen this before. It might ring some bells. You might have heard of the drooping clocks, as it were. But this is a piece by Salvador Dali, one of his most famous paintings ever. Salvador Dali was probably the most famous surrealist artist in the history of the world. He is from the area north of Barcelona in Spain. And you'll see kind of like, well, first, I'm giving you this example because this is a piece of art that's hugely formative for me. I experienced it when I was young, and getting excited about Salvador Dali was one of these kind of gateways into art that really, really got me going. So it's an important piece to me, but I think it's also an example, as I was saying, of kind of what you see in the piece, that art is an expression of what's in our mind, right? And our experience and our influences. So with Salvador Dali, who grew up on the northern coast of Spain along the Mediterranean there north of Barcelona, these rocks and like formations here that you see are very emblematic of that landscape, right? So you see, oh, this artist is from Catalonia, right? From Spain, the province there, bordering on France and bordering the Mediterranean Sea. And, you know, it's cool to see those influences and make those connections in art. And Dali, as a surrealist, was really kind of painting super far out stuff. He didn't think reality should confine his paintings. And honestly, for me, I think that was a really incredible kind of notion to come across as a young creative person, which was that art allows us to go in any direction and it's not confined by reality. So we can create far out stuff, right? We can draw a horse with wings. It's not real, but it's really interesting and far out and cool, right? So you don't have to be limited really in any way. And that kind of freedom is something that Salvador Dali and his works, I think really, inspired in me. And moving on, kind of another point to ponder and to pause with. Mr. Thomas, feel free to pause here and kind of talk about it a little bit more. And this kind of dovetails into part of what I mentioned in my first question, which is like, why would we install artwork in your hallways, right? Like, why would we make art visible to you and available to you in your school instead of a museum, right? And so here you can kind of talk about like, what's it like to be in a museum? How do you feel in a museum? Is it very casual or is it more uptight, right? How do you feel when you walked in, how did you feel when you walked into LaSalle and saw all this art up on the walls where there wasn't before, right? Like, what did that do? And yeah, why would we potentially try to create this experience for you where you're surrounded by art, right? So yeah, I think this is a good time to kind of like think about space, think about how spaces make us feel, and also think about kind of an issue that's big to us, which is kind of the populism of art, right? That we think art, at IPaintMyMind, we believe art should be available to all communities, and that you should be able to engage with it and experience it and enjoy it and learn from it, even in your school or in your community. You shouldn't have to go to Michigan Avenue to go to the Museum of Contemporary Art or the Art Institute to see something really, really important that excites you, that connects you, right? And another thing, I think that as far as the specifics, right, we're not showing you Dali or old dead white guys from Europe, right? We're showing you artists who are working here in Chicago. And so why would we show that art instead of other art, right? And so you can kind of like pause here and chew on that a little bit. And this is kind of my answer to that question, right? Art opens our minds to new possibilities for ourselves in the world. So obviously we're an organization that focuses on art and focuses on the transformative power of art, right? That we believe that if you experience, reflect, and make art, that you will be activated, that you will feel realized in a way, you will feel empowered to whether it's make more art or really just think of new solutions for the future, right? Because at the end of the day, every piece of art was nothing. It was an idea, and then it was made real, right? So you can take something from zero to completely done. And I just think kind of creating that reality is an incredible process. So we really do hope that this experience with Mr. Thomas, our art in your school, this experience with our art guides via e-learning do really open you up to new possibilities for yourselves in the world. So what would you make? How do you want to shape the future? Is it art? Is it a company? Is it an invention? Is it a new cool nonprofit that's helping in an important way? at the end of the day, I think turning things into reality, and art being an example of doing that, is an incredible way to just get you guys excited about what you can do and who you can be in the world. So here we go, kind of dipping into the experience, reflect, make framework. So how many of you have had a new idea after experiencing some new art? You know, for me, when I'm walking around, say, New York City and enjoying a bunch of street art, or even if I'm in a museum, I'll often have pen and paper or my little notebooks so that I can kind of make notes, both about like um, specific details, but also kind of sensations that I'm having, feelings that I'm having, like what it's making me think about and where my head's going, right? So oftentimes for me, really, art is this incredible springboard to just kind of jump into a lot of really great brainstorming. And so you might have seen this in the art guides that Mr. Thomas is using, that we provided this year, but really in section 3 of our art guide, we lay out all these activities, which Mr. Thomas is going to choose the ones that he likes and kind of roll those out with you. But we talk about those activities going through this 3-step process, right? Experience, reflect, and make. And so, as I mentioned just a little bit before, we believe that when you experience art, it lights this fire. When you reflect on art, it helps you dive in to understand and build towards being able to make. And then that culmination of creating your own art is kind of the final path through that doorway of really being activated and taking your inspiration and turning it into something brand new. And so this is something where we can kind of, thinking about the art that moves us. I think this is like so important. And really, it's interesting because I think once you start thinking about the art that has moved you, you'll realize that art exists in so many different ways, right? Art is music, a concert, a movie, a documentary, dance, sculpture. Art is in advertising, packaging. Art is in product design. So actually creating the product is a creative, artistic troubleshooting process, right? So art is really embedded into all these things. Cartoons are just fun, but someone drew those illustrations, they animated it, added the audio, and now you have this incredible experience, artistic experience, right? So these are some questions that I think really help us unpack who you are, what has been important to you in your life, what people are important to you, what ideas, backgrounds, places, cities, quotes, foods. This is all about who you are, what you are, who you live with, and kind of thinking about what this means for the art that you would make, right? So these questions here on the side: what kind of art do you like? What words would you use to describe it? What colors, shapes, spaces, and ideas get you excited? What's the first thing you notice in a piece of art? For me, color is the first thing, right? So it's what I'm most attracted to and what I'm kind of looking for. And then, as I mentioned, kind of how does our family, our culture, our neighborhood, our friends, and our world influence what we're attracted to artistically, right? So whether thinking about our brothers and sisters and different like cartoons or maybe graffiti or music that our siblings or cousins or friends kind of turn us on to. So now we're going to get into a little bit of my photography. So some examples of some work that I've done, a series that I'm really excited about that I think you all have checked out a little bit already. And yeah, we'll kind of be able to point to a few different elements of photography, so some different things that you want to think about when you're taking photos as well, and also kind of showing you what those look like in some examples of my work. So this is really cool. I had an awesome conversation with Mr. Thomas the other day about this work because he told me that you guys had started to kind of look at it and had some kind of initial questions, right? And so the first question could be like, how did this get made, right? Mr. Thomas even wanted me to clarify, like, is this a photo? So yeah, guys, these are all photos that you see, okay? And I'm gonna go down to a few other examples as well, bigger examples, and you'll also see kind of more shots in this series. But really quickly, the idea with the series is these are all photos that I took with my iPhone 10. Really, all the smartphones these days have incredible resolution. I'm sure some of you have your phones as well. And really, as far as the specs, what the cameras on an iPhone can do is really quite incredible, especially if you shoot at the highest resolution. It's also a really incredible tool for shooting video. Realistically, you could spend $5,000 on a camera that had similar specifications as the iPhone cameras do. And so it's really incredible. You can get really high resolution shots. But just to tell you about this, so post no bills is what I call this series, right? And yeah, I mean, the idea here is that in New York City, right, all over the place, you'll have these big boards up that are blocking kind of to keep people on the sidewalks safe, right, from construction that's happening in a building. So it's a big like green board. And oftentimes you'll see advertisement or bills for shows, different kind of paper and letters and words and stuff that then get ripped off, and then more bills get put over. So you end up having like all this ripped paper, the rain comes on it, it's all kind of like yucky and weird in some places, and all like you have like ripped paper and texture and all this really cool stuff. So what I would do is, as I walk around New York City, I would go up to these walls and take really up close photos of a section of a wall. So if you say you look at, for example, like this purple one up here, that is probably actually only like 12 inches by 8 inches of wall. So I got up really close to the wall. I kind of liked how these different lines were like coming through, right? And actually, this red, this purple, this dark purple, none of that was in there. It was more just, those were more like white spaces in other colors. And so what I actually did is, after I took the photo, I then, in my phone even, was able to edit and pull out different colors and play with contrast. Similarly with this red and yellow and green piece and this red and light blue piece, all of these really, I messed with the color a ton. So you kind of pull out these textures and you see that if you would have walked past the exact same wall that I took a photo of, you wouldn't have seen this cool pink and red thing or this red and green thing, right? Because those colors did not exist there. Adding those colors, pumping up those colors, adding to the contrast, the darkness in some of these areas, the texture that you see in these photos, all of that is part of making the art, right? So I have a lot of fun with these. Here are some other examples. This one was like so rained on that it didn't look like the paper, the jaggedy ripped paper that you see in some of these others. It was just like so washed away. And then I just punched up that blue color because it really spoke to me. I liked that kind of contrast. So yeah, you can go through our collection online, and Mr. Thomas can show you more of these photos of the post-all bills series. And yeah, now that we have them in a nice bigger size, we can kind of look at these a little more, right? So again, I got up really close to the wall, and then I started kind of like moving it around, right? Checking out how I wanted to compose the shot. So composition is really about like, what are you including in the shot? How does this, if I had taken the shot higher up, like starting here, then I would have missed like all of this nice line. So maybe I was like, oh no, I want that. And seeing that there's these cool letters here, okay, I want to include those. So I'll start it a little lower and kind of compose the photo and frame it up in a way that I get these kind of elements that I think, make it interesting and fun. So now moving over to some photography that I did for a more commercial project. This was for a real estate project in Lincoln Park. And this is a shot that I took from really not very far from where you all often are at LaSalle. But this is the pond there at the park. by the boathouse. And again, like really what we're kind of looking at is the different elements in the piece and how it comes together to please the eye, right? So we can kind of look over a few kind of like elements here. So, you know, kind of the foreground is the space here in the front of the photo, right? And the background is back here, right? So really what I find interesting is having a nice kind of mix of like elements that draw the eye to the front of the photo. These benches for me do that, and some of this textural piece on the ground. And then this fence here is perfect because it really kind of divides the shot, right? It creates this whole line across that segments our foreground from our background. You get the cool water like coming through. And then obviously Hancock in downtown Chicago in the background there, right? Immediately you know where this is, you know it's Chicago, and you know, again, this photo, it was a little lower light, it was in the morning, and so you get that kind of like beautiful golden orange sunrise hue that's like going on back here. But again, even in post-production, I was able to punch up those colors, make this blue nice and clean. It was for a real estate project, so a building where they were trying to sell condos in Lincoln Park. So they really wanted it to look great and magical and special, right? Here's a few other examples of some photography that I took in Argentina. So again, for me, lines are also really important, right? Color, lines, contrast to me are like really important elements. So these stones are just like great, right? This graffiti, it's rugged, it's textural. I really like texture, things that make you feel like where you can perceive the dimension, the 3D kind of nature of stuff in the texture of the shot. And this is, yeah, just railroads are always great. They can just kind of frame up the shot perfectly for you. These lines that are just like shooting off into the background. Again, a little bit of graffiti and stuff on the side, but yeah, for me, these lines, both in the cobblestone and in this sidewalk, that just again divides the shot and gives you a real nice shape and kind of sense of space. Same thing happening here with the railroad. And you see the same thing happening here, right, with this shot. So this is up in Northern Illinois at a campground that we go to often. And this dock was just like beautiful little lilies and flowers around the side, nice blue sky. And it just called to me. Whenever I see symmetry is also really incredible. Our eye just wants to see proportionality. It wants to see things straight. And so photos like this really kind of do the trick. This photo over here, it's the symmetry is a little off actually, but you know, that'll happen sometimes. But this is actually one of my favorite photos that I've ever taken. This was taken near Halong Bay in northern Vietnam, near the border with China. And yeah, my wife and I were walking around and enjoying and the islands and everything, and just came around a corner and saw this incredibly textured wall with this beautiful kind of seafoam green door. Yeah, and then again in post, did things to really pump up some of the white and the texture and some of this paint around the door and pump up the color. Cool. So this is where we can kind of get into the education of it and the principles of photography composition. There are other kind of elements of photography, and really kind of going through a more exhaustive checklist would take some time. I'll send along some other resources to Mr. Thomas so that you guys can engage in some of these. I would definitely suggest kind of going through this list, right? I'll also send along a link to the article that kind of talks about this specific list. But there's a few items on here that I think are really interesting, especially as we kind of think about photography specifically, right? So one here is the non-blank canvas. So it's a pretty, what does that mean? Non-blank canvas, blank, non-blank. So there's something on the canvas when we start. And yeah, that's basically what it is, right? With photography, you don't get to start with just a white field. When you look through your viewfinder, you see what you see. The canvas is filled already, right? So really what we're talking about with composition is like, it's always going to be filled. You're shooting something, but what is it filled with? And is it interesting? and is it working, right? As you go into point two, as far as like positioning, right? Is the angle low? Is it higher? How does that make us feel about it? You know, how does it essentially convey what we want it to? And by including different pieces, right, we can make it feel certain ways, as I mentioned with my kind of post all bills photo there a couple minutes ago with the purple one. Forcing a photograph, that's just really kind of like when you get into too tight or you're not getting that kind of composition, you can just kind of tell. There's a certain kind of just ease that comes with when you feel the composition coming into place. Yeah, and you know, I think the eye's journey is a really cool point as well, right? Because what we're talking about the eye's journey is, you know, where does your eye go first, right? And why? So is it texture, is it color, is it line? A lot of times line becomes kind of the first place that you go, but also just thinking about how does someone tend to experience the photograph? Say we're taking a photo of a bird in the foreground with a bunch of trees behind them, right? So like, what are we going to see first? Is that first little detail on the bird's wing because there's a yellow detail there? And how does that lead into the composition of the photo to what we look at second and third and fourth, right? And this just kind of comes back to the strength of the photo and what you've captured. And kind of making it clear, because of how great the photo is, what that kind of experience can be as far as the eye's journey. And yeah, I think I like rules if you must, right? I'm not big on rules, you guys. There's some rules that really must be followed, so please do listen to your teachers. But as far as photography, you know, it's really wide open. I would encourage you to just take a lot of shots, see what you see, take stuff from different angles, like not really worry too much about making sure that you have everything on lists like these checked off, but really being experimental, right? And not being too precious about what you capture. I really like really focusing on photos, but also taking photos in kind of more intuitive ways where like I lower my hand to the floor to see like what it looks like there, right? There's even a series of photos that I've done that I call From the Pavement, because I put my phone all the way down so that it's leaning on the concrete and it gets this really specific, interesting angle and shot. Cool. So this is going to be our little activity that I'm going to set you up with. And what we're talking about here are these types of microcosm shots that I took with the post all bills photos, where you get up really close, you take a really concise, nice photo of what you're wanting to get, and then you manipulate color, contrast, shadow, all that stuff in post-production. So here we go. We're going to have you create your own post no bills type shot. So I'd love to see what kind of microcosm shots you can come up with. It's a really simple exercise and it'll be a lot of fun, and you'll all have your kind of first example of taking what I call a microcosm shot with some post that really kind of pumps up color and makes it look interesting. And again, a microcosm, micro, small, right? Microcosm just means like we're getting in close, we're getting small. We want to get this small section that then through post we can kind of reveal and bring to light and make fun in a new way for the viewer. So number one, take a photo of something small with your smartphone or iPad. If you have another type of digital camera, like feel free, although editing right there on the camera will be difficult. So if you're in an iPhone, most Androids, you'll be able to just like take your photo, pop right into that photo, hit edit, and start messing around with some of those different quantities. I would also encourage you to, once you start doing that, save different versions of it. Maybe you pump up the contrast so it's really black and white, or you change the lighting or the color in another way. You could have a series that is really the same photo with different post-production basically added to it. So yeah, so you can walk around your home or maybe even your block. If you can, you know, put a mask on, get outside, get some fresh air before it gets too cold out. You know, you can walk around your home or your block, notice something, or maybe your backyard. Notice something textured, small, and interesting. take a photo of it, right? Try different angles. Maybe try that from the pavement technique where I laid it on the ground. Maybe do one from straight over it, right? Playing with angle is a really great way to give shots all different kinds of perspective and feeling. And then the second spot here, we're going to say, edit the photo in your default photo editor. So if you are taking the photo on your phone, you should be able to pop right into the image and hit edit and then start cropping, contrast, lighting, shadows, highlights, all that stuff. So yeah, play with all of it until you find something that you like. For those post-all bill shots in New York City, I would take a bunch of shots, go to a coffee shop, get a coffee, and sit there and really have fun kind of editing them and seeing what they could be. Yeah, I think this will be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to see what you all make. And then Mr. Thomas can collect the work and put it in a Google slide to present to me so we can see what you guys are making. Maybe even share some of your stuff on Instagram. All right, y'all. That's me. I really appreciate you all making the time to have me do this presentation. I would have loved to come into your class, and hopefully we can still do that later in the year. But, at I Paint My Mind, we're really about how art just makes life better. And we really think that growing this partnership with LaSalle and all these other schools in the city is an incredible opportunity for us to get really great kids like yourselves excited about what you can make in the future. And again, some of us don't think of ourselves as artists or photographers even, or any of that stuff. But I would say that I think we're all creative, in different ways. And we bring our creativity to bear in all different types of work. So, whether you become an artist or not, that's not exactly the point, right? What we want to see is that you're connecting who you are with what you want to be in the world in the future that you'd like to see. So whether you make art or a really cool company or invent the next great invention, we really hope that experiences like these are fun for you, and that help kind of provide some of that spark to really get you creating this future that we're so excited to see you build. So thank you so much for being engaged, for enjoying this. Mr. Thomas, thank you for everything you're doing. Principal Graves, we're so excited to be partnered with LaSalle again this year, and we look forward to really keeping this program going on for years so that you can experience it the whole time you're there at LaSalle. Thanks again, everybody. Evan LaRuffa from I Paint My Mind. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Peace, y'all.